Thank you. Now go to order number 11.
Order number 11, the National Infrastructure Fund Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of 2026, second reading.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the National Infrastructure Fund Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of 2026, be now read a second time. Honorable Speaker, allow me first to thank the Chair and the Committee of Finance and National Planning that has considered this bill and taken it through a program of very rigorous public participation since it was read the first time in the House. And the Chair has just this afternoon tabled the report of the committee on their consideration of this bill, including the input of the public during public participation. Honorable Speaker, it is important to give a background on the genesis or the basis on which we find this bill in the House at this particular time, because it's not by accident, Honorable Speaker. Neither is it on second thought. This bill, Honorable Speaker, if you read the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, and specifically, Honorable Speaker, on page 10 of that manifesto, it said that we shall establish a national infrastructure fund which will be financed from the proceeds of privatization proceeds of state corporations that will be privatized, Honorable Speaker. And this gives us the genesis of the thought of having a national infrastructure fund twinned with the National Sovereign Wealth Fund. And not to mention, Honorable Speaker, that last year, in August of last year, this House also enacted the Government-Owned Enterprises Act that underpinned the basis on which we are now doing this National Infrastructure Fund. And I'm saying this, Honorable Speaker, because there are those who have made everyone to believe that this is an afterthought, or this is something that is being done as an afterthought without having any strategic thinking into it, Honorable Speaker. And it is these naysayers that I want to remind that this bill did not just find itself on the floor of this House. It has a basis of where it has come from. Let me also draw reference to what was said by His Excellency the President in his State of the Nation address last year. Honorable Speaker, if you allow me to quote, or rather to read part of that speech by His Excellency the President at the tail end of last year. And you remember, Honorable Speaker, the President had begun his speech by talking about 4 national priorities or national imperatives that we must as a country invest in, touching on energy, touching on water for irrigation, the construction of 50 mega dams and another 200 medium-sized dams to ensure that we no longer depend on rain-fed agriculture in provision of food. He also spoke about the investment, the huge investment that we need to put into the infrastructure of the expansion of our road network. And I remember him going through a whole list of projects, road projects that would be dualed. And of course, what caught my attention was the dualing of Mutahi, Kiambu, Numberi Road. And of course, the investment into a new expressway from Museum Hill all the way to Thika. Not to mention the Kericho, Kisii, Migori, Sabania Road, the Mau Summit, Rironi Road, Gong, Bomas Bypass, Karen Gong Bypass, of course, which touches Honorable Ngogoyo's constituency, and I can't see him smiling broadly here because he knows how long it takes him to come from Matasia to the National Assembly. But with the huge infrastructure investment in many of these, and many others, including the SGR extension, because we left an SGR and it was christened the railway to nowhere, because it was left hanging somewhere near Suswa after Dukamoja. And the expansion, or rather the extension of that SGR all the way to Kisumu, Malaba, and to our border with our neighbors, Uganda, and of course opening us to the landlocked countries in the Great Lakes region to expand trade opportunities between our country and the East African region. And the four imperatives that the president spoke to, he said that we must invest in those projects, not because they are cheap, but because they're imperatives. And the imperatives because these are what will take our nation to the next level. And in so doing, Honorable Speaker, I'd requested your indulgence to allow me to just read what the president said of these things. That he said, Honorable Speaker, that we cannot continue funding such essential and capital-heavy infrastructure from our own budget because it will necessitate that we continue either to borrow or to overburden taxpayers with additional taxation. And he said we cannot continue funding essential infrastructure through unsustainable borrowing or overburdening taxpayers with additional taxes. But neither can we afford to postpone these imperatives without risking our future. We therefore can't afford to postpone these imperatives. And I have heard some naysayers saying, oh, it is possible to build all these things without borrowing. It is possible to do it from our revenues. Honorable Speaker, the same naysayers who will also tell us that we have so much resources that we raise and so much that we are spending in repaying our debt and repaying our other obligations under the Consolidated Fund Services. And the president went on to say that there is a need to be innovative in the use of national revenues at our disposal. The revenues that we raise, we must be innovative in how we utilize them. But also in the deployment of national assets available to us and in creating public-private partnerships that will crowd in the enormous pool of private sector resources available regionally and globally. That is part of the objective of this bill, that you'll be able to crowd in the huge and immense resources that we have in the private sector, globally and regionally, to be able to raise more capital to invest in these capital-intensive projects. To Honorable Speaker, the President went on to say that this is why we will establish the National Infrastructure Fund, whose architecture will be underpinned by the reforms in the Government-Owned Enterprises Bill, which was passed by this House in August last year, and he indicated at that time that he would be signing that law the following day, and which I can confirm the President did assent to the Government-Owned Enterprises Bill, which is now an act of Parliament. And that is what is underpinning this National Infrastructure Fund. And he went on to say that this fund is a strategic solution that will provide a framework to innovatively scale up our resources to match our ambition. It will fulfill our manifesto commitment to rebuild Kenya's infrastructure while reducing reliance on debt. We will do this by using budgeted resources prudently and introducing a financing architecture that leverages capital markets, diversifies ownership through unlocking of national assets through privatization, and uses the public-private partnership frameworks to channel private capital into public priorities. Honorable Speaker, for decades, and I remember the President alluding to that also, Kenya has privatized major public assets. This is not the first time that we are privatizing public assets. You remember we privatized KPLC, we privatized Kenyan, we privatized Safaricom, and the call then was for us as members of parliament and as legislators and policymakers to ask ourselves, what national asset exists today that we can show out of the privatization proceeds when we sold Safaricom, when we sold Kenyan, when we sold KQ, or even KPLC. And we can't show anything, Honorable Speaker, because many of these privatization proceeds have always gone into financing our budget, and that money is spent either paying salaries or repaying part of our debt. And I must thank the President because he did commit that he will ensure any other privatization proceeds that we get from the sale of our national assets in the parastatals that are lined up for sale or for privatization, none, not a shilling, not a coin of that money will go either into repaying our public debt or into financing our budget to pay salaries or other recurrent expenditure, Honorable Speaker. And the President did say that the National Infrastructure Fund then will come in to break in that cycle. The cycle where you dispose of national assets and you have nothing tomorrow to show for it. And he said that all proceeds from the privatization will be ring-fenced, preserved, and reinvested into new infrastructure and wealth-creating assets. When ownership shifts to the private sector, Honorable Speaker, there is efficiency, and the benefits to the public, Honorable Speaker, don't diminish. Indeed, they multiply. And I have said here before, Honorable Speaker, I think when we were anticipating debate some time back on the sale of Safaricom shares, that if you look at the Safaricom before privatization, what it was, and the behemoth of an institution that Safaricom is today, courtesy of the privatization or the sale of shares by the government of Kenya to Vodacom, and also during the IPO of Safaricom to private sector players, the efficiency that came into that company and many others, and you see the same efficiency will come into KPC and many other institutions that have been privatized, that private sector efficiency coming into the public sector is only beneficial, and it never diminishes the gains or the benefits to the public. It only multiplies the benefits. That is why today Safaricom, KPLC, Kenyan are more efficient, they are employing more people, they are generating more wealth, not just to their shareholders, but also to this country. Safaricom pays taxes in hundreds of billions of shillings every year. Safaricom, when the telecom industry was a monopoly of telecom, the old KPTC, Kenya Post and Telecommunications, where Honorable Chebukong used to work. You know, that KPTC, former KPTC, is a pale shadow of what Safaricom today is. Not to mention that there are other players that have also come into the market in that space of telcos, Airtel and all the others, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, the intent of this National Infrastructure Fund is to leverage not just on private sector expertise and capital, but also to multiply the benefits to the public of what we hold as public assets. And those in this house, like Honorable Amboka, who has just walked in, who superintend or who oversight our public investments in state corporations, will tell you there is a lot of wastage of public resources in many of the state corporations that are in this country, Honorable Speaker. And one of the ways to ensure that we stem this wastage is to inject private sector capital and private sector expertise and management into this space, Honorable Speaker. And that is part of what the intent of this fund. This fund will be managed by a board of directors or a board of management that will be, or one, the language in the bill is that the board shall be competitively recruited, Honorable Speaker. And if you go, those who have bothered to read the bill, Honorable Speaker, and I say those who have bothered to read the bill because many just speak out there without even reading the bill and saying, the board will have political appointees. This bill, Honorable Speaker, specifies the mode of appointment of the CEO. The board shall be recruited competitively from the private sector, Honorable Speaker, or independent board members, including the chair. In the past, Honorable Speaker, you know, chairs of boards and directors of boards have been nominated not in a very competitive manner, and we have seen a lot of political patronage in the appointment of chairs of boards. This, both the chair, the CEO, and all the independent directors or board members shall be recruited competitively, Honorable Speaker, to make sure that we have a board, a fund that is being managed in a very prudent manner and in a way that it gives priority to national or public interests, Honorable Speaker, other than political interests. Honorable Speaker, we are not the first nation to do this. And I think it's important to mention case examples, successful case examples of other funds like this that have done well. And this is a proven model that has worked in Australia. Australia's future fund is modeled around what we are doing today as a country. Therefore, when we say that we are moving from being a third world country to a first world country, It is not just in terms of the strategic interventions that have been made, but also in the legislation that we seek to make. And I must thank members because you are all here. We all participated in the enactment of the Government-Owned Enterprises Act. And I thank you for being here also to participate in the enacting of this National Infrastructure Fund. And I remember last year, if you remember, in his State of the Nation address, the President did challenge us that it is this generation, it is this 13th Parliament that will be remembered in the transformation of our republic when this nation eventually transforms from being a third world country, Honorable Speaker. I have mentioned the Australia's Future Fund, Honorable Speaker. If you go to Singapore, and I know the road to Singapore or the transformation of a country from a third world to a first world nation has been christened as a journey to Singapore. The road to Singapore, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Speaker, if you can protect me from my young old boy, or the Honorable Clive Gisairo, who attended the Alliance High School years after I left, and now he has the audacity to shout from his seat. He should know I was in charge of discipline, and Honorable Speaker, now you're in charge of discipline, so please discipline me to read the bill and contribute to the bill. And I was giving examples, Honorable Speaker, of places where these such similar funds have worked. I've mentioned the Australia's Future Fund, Singapore itself. The Temasek in Singapore is such a fund that has also worked for their country in the transformation of their country. UAE's or the United Arab Emirates Mubadala demonstrates that commercially run public investment funds can grow national wealth and deliver transformative infrastructure. That is the other intent of this bill, Honorable Speaker, that we will have a public investment fund that will not only grow our national wealth, but will deliver on that transformative infrastructure in the development of dams for irrigation, for provision of water, in the provision, generation, distribution, and provision of energy to be able to drive the industrial transformation that we intend to have, Honorable Speaker, which we have spoken for over the years. Honorable Speaker, I have had cases or a story being told of the investment. Almost, I don't know, a few $1 billion investment that was to come to Naivasha. And I wish the member of Naivasha was here. I hear there is a neighbor from Naivasha in Nyoro who is behind me, the member for Nyoro. The county of Nakuru was to benefit from a project worth billions of dollars in the provision of a data center or the construction and investment of a data center. But the only reason why that project has not taken off, Honorable Speaker, or could not take off, is because we didn't have the energy. And it was built with a huge investment in the geothermal wells in Olkaria, and those in Menengai. Probably we had enough energy to run that data center. But it became clear to the investors and to us as a country that we did not even have a third of the energy that was required. That data center had the potential to employ hundreds of thousands of Kenyans directly and many others indirectly, leave alone the immense FDI or foreign direct investment that would have come into this economy. But we lost that because we didn't have enough energy. It is that investment in generation of energy, distribution of energy that we must put in. It is that investment in that extension of SGR, our ports, both seaports and airports, Honorable Speaker. Look at the opportunity, Honorable Speaker, because every crisis comes with an opportunity, Honorable Speaker. The most efficient of world airlines are in the Gulf region. Qatar Airlines, Etihad's, Emirates of this world. Today, they are all grounded for the last 3 or so days. People are stuck in Dubai, others in Europe and elsewhere. They have planes that Kenya Airways doesn't have, but they can't move. What if we had an efficient Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, state-of-the-world Moi International Airport in Mombasa, world-class airport at Moi Airport in Eldoret, Kisumu International Airport, or even the one in Lokichogi, Honorable Speaker. Those are the opportunities that we miss today because we slackened or we delayed in making deliberate, huge infrastructural investments, be it in the development of our roads infrastructure or our sea and airports. But we cannot afford, Honorable Speaker, to wait anymore. We cannot afford, Honorable Speaker, to leave to what many want to tell us, that, oh, I've heard some tell us here that, oh, Mwai Kibaki built one highway called Thika Road that was built at a cost of 28 billion shillings. And forget to tell us that Mwai Kibaki had the pre-2010 constitution. He never had any obligation to send 400 billion shillings every year to counties. And maybe for those who join this house later, than me and my friend Nelson here, or yourself, Honorable Speaker, may not know that this is the 13th, in the 11th Parliament, the then chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, fine gentleman, man of God, the Reverend Mutava Musimi, led the Budget and Appropriations Committee then, which was comprised of about 51 members then, around the country, auditing the implementation of the 2010 Constitution. And I would invite those who speak for political expediency many a times to speak to the gallery, to take their time because that report is here in the table office, to go and read that report. Then you will see the dichotomy that is there before the 2010 Constitution and the challenges of administrations that came post the 2010 Constitution, or the administrations in this country that will have to implement the 2010 Constitution. Then you will understand, so that when you are speaking out there to seek cheap publicity, political publicity, Honorable Speaker, that sense may come back to you to speak as a leader, not as a politician. Speak to what is right. Speak to what is good for the country. Because these four imperatives that were spoken to us here in the State of the Nation address last year are not national imperatives for one leader or for this parliament. They are national imperatives for this generation of leaders and the next generation of Kenyans and generations to come. That is why someone once said that politicians look at the next general election. That is why you'll hear people say things that they think will excite the masses for the next election. That is why you'll hear them talk about terms with no agenda, with no plan, with no thinking as to what they have for the country, Honorable Speaker.
Order, Honorable Mbui and Undo.
It is, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Ondo is very innocent. You know, Honorable Ondo listens to contributions because he makes sensible contributions in the House. It is those who are shouting because they know what they usually shout out there who are shouting. I do not need to name them. They know themselves. It is like those who are celebrating the death of a colleague to make political capital in a rally in Nyahururu. Shame on them, Honorable Speaker. And shame on that person who was also shouting here, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, this bill or this fund, how will it be financed? And I'm saying this for the benefit of the member for Kajiado North, that this fund will be financed with proceeds from privatization and disposal of government assets. So the proceeds of the IPO of KPC will not go to pay salaries for members of parliament or pay your mileage on a bongoyo. This money will come into this fund. Neither will the proceeds, should this House approve the partial divestiture of Safaricom by the government of Kenya, the money that will be raised will also come into this fund. Two, there will be parliamentary appropriations, and it is you as members of parliament who appropriate money into this fund as a source of fund. And of course, there are also, if you read in the bill, part 4 of the bill, part 6 of the bill, you also see that there also be other monies from any other source provided for or donated or lent to the fund. or even such fees, monies, or assets as may accrue to or be vested in the fund in the course of the exercise of its powers or the performance of its functions under the Act, should it become an Act, or under any other written law. Honorable Speaker, the establishment of this fund will significantly enhance the country's capacity to deliver, as I said, on transformative infrastructure projects in roads, railways, energy, water infrastructure, and other strategic national assets across the country. Honorable Speaker, for those who have cared to go through the bill, if you read part 4 of the bill, the board of the bill is mandated to develop an investment policy, and it is this investment policy which must be approved by the Cabinet Secretary, and the Cabinet Secretary means the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary. It is this investment policy that will prioritize sectors that are proposed for development to ensure that there is equity across the nation, Honorable Speaker. 2, they will specify the proposed projects and see any existing incomplete projects from the previous investment policy to ensure that if they are proposed new projects, you must first complete any that were in the previous investment policy before you invest in new programs or projects, Honorable Speaker. 4 is also to give the expected rate of return on investment on specific projects. And this is to ensure also that money is prudently and transparently invested, and in a way, prudently invested in a way that there is a good return. And therefore, there must be a proper evaluation of the investments that are to be invested in to make sure that you do not deplete this fund. It will also specify the asset allocation and portfolio distribution and the exposure limits per sector and per project, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the board will also adopt an investment plan that will be based on the national strategic objectives, Honorable Speaker. And this investment plan, for instance, is the first board will be informed by what has already been debated in this House, those 4 strategic interventions that the President spoke to in the State of the Nation address, in ensuring that we invest in our human capital and education. Because, Honorable Speaker, the cost of education, not just in this country, globally, is very expensive. But it has been said that if you want to know how expensive education is, try ignorance or try not educate your country, then you know then how expensive it could be if you do not educate. And therefore, we must invest in the education of our children. We must invest in water resources management, either through the construction of those 50 mega dams and the 200 medium-sized dams, generation of electricity, and also the growth of our industries, Honorable Speaker, through that generated power to create jobs for the youth that then we educate. And therefore, this bill is creating the provision under Part 3 that the board will have that responsibility of adopting an investment plan that will be based on those national strategic objectives. And that plan, Honorable Speaker, will form the basis of the annual performance contracts which the board must sign between them and the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury. Because we want to hold people to account. And that is why the bill has those particular imperatives that you must have a performance contract signed between the board so that we measure and evaluate how they are doing. If you promised us a certain rate of return, if you promised us delivery of certain infrastructure projects, if you are not able to do it, Honorable Speaker, when you are being evaluated, and for those who have cared to go through the performance evaluation in clause 20 of this bill, you will see that the bill provides for a very good mechanism of evaluating their performance, having a performance-based contract for the board and the management of this fund, Honorable Speaker, and also ensuring, as I said earlier, that there is competitive recruitment of both the board and the secretariat that will manage this fund, Honorable Speaker, to ensure that we have the best. And that is why you see even in the board, if you are Kimani Ichungwa or Robert Mbui, and you have served in a political office or have been affiliated with a political party in the last 5 years, including those who serve as party officials, you cannot and you shall not be nominated for appointment to this board, because we must protect. Honorable Speaker, if you can protect me from this member for Kajiado North, Honorable Ngogoyo. And you know Honorable Ngogoyo was an MCA in Kajiado, and I had visited his ward when he was an MCA there.
Order.
It was ordinary for...
When I look at the screen here, my presumption was that you really want to contribute on this matter and order and say, but I only see you talking across the... You should communicate through the chair. And in any case, for God's sake, if you have some good ideas about this private infrastructural fund, then if you don't have a card, come and tell me that you don't have a card. And I'll pick you so that you can also make your contributions.
Honorable Speaker.
This is a house of debate. And the debate is also structured, it's done in a disciplined way. My Honorable Mbui, I'm sure you know that. It's your third term in the House. Proceed, Leader Majority.
Honorable Speaker, I think Honorable Robert Mbui is the one to blame, because he turned next to Honorable Ngogoyo, and Ngogoyo, being a first-time member, may think in the House you just sit and shout one term or two term. Honorable Mbui is the one who should be helping Ngogoyo to tell him to read the bill and contribute to what is in the bill. And what is in the bill, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure that this fund is not misused. The bill has also put mechanisms in place which will include the fund being audited by the Auditor General, and that Auditor General will report to you as members of Parliament. You know, you are the ones who oversight the Auditor General, and all her reports, all the reports of the Office of the Auditor General end up in this House. Therefore, you will have your place in making sure that whatever is audited comes to this House. That is why you see diligent people and chairs of committees like Honorable Amboka is very keen to listen, because he knows these reports will come to him in his Public Investments Committee or PAC, for that matter. Two, Honorable Speaker, is to ensure that there is no overdrawing of this fund. You cannot overdraw this fund, Honorable Speaker, and that is an imperative that we are legislating in law here. Also to ensure that we cap the expenditure in the fund, that it shall never and it cannot exceed its annual income. Therefore, when the fund is established, they have a secretariat. If anybody imagines that is the opportunity to go and start buying buildings in town or buying cars for the chairman and directors and CEOs and whoever else, we shall regulate how much you can expend, and it must be within what you are generating. Two is a ring-fence withdrawal, as I said, even in terms of investments. What kind of projects are you investing in? Are they properly evaluated? Do they have a return? Are they commercially viable? Those are the issues, Honorable Speaker. Five is also to ensure that there is reinvestment of any surplus, so that if we have any surplus from the fund, that money doesn't just hang around like used to happen in many parastatals. And I must thank the National Treasury. In the last 2 years, Honorable Speaker, they have been able to mop up a lot of surplus funds in many of our public investments. And therefore, this fund, we're also saying, just like all other public investment funds, if there's any surplus, it must be reinvested to keep growing the fund, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I could belabor too many points in the bill, and I want to imagine that many members have read this bill and are aware of the provisions of what is in the bill. I would just implore on all of us to support this bill, because it is establishing a very structured and transparent process that also identifies, evaluates, and even an approval process and financing of infrastructure projects in the country. And if you go through clauses 21 to 25, that very detailed structure and framework has been established, and one that will ensure there's transparency, even in how you identify projects, how you evaluate those projects, how they are approved, all that is put in the bill, and how those projects will be financed. Honorable Speaker, I mentioned the issue of the investment policy, which will be done and will subsist for a period of 5 years. Therefore, just allow me, Honorable Speaker, to conclude by saying that this fund is within the powers that have been vested by our Constitution to this House. And Honorable Speaker, you know our Constitution in Article 206, sub-Article 1A, empowers Parliament to establish other public funds for a specific purpose through an act of Parliament. And that is why I began by giving the genesis of where this fund is coming from, right from the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto. When we campaigned around the country, we went to every village, every county in this country, and we told the Kenyan people that we will have a national infrastructure fund which we shall utilize to grow our economy. And you know where the economy was at that time, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, what we are doing today, this bill is giving effect to this constitutional provision by creating that very well-structured and accountable framework for infrastructure financing in the country without overburdening either the Kenyan people through additional taxes or overburdening future generations through additional funding. Honorable Speaker, allow me to conclude by just giving a simple example, and I gave you the example of the opportunity that we would have had if Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, Moi International Airport, Kisumu International Airport, the airport in Lokichogio, the airport in Eldoret and Mombasa were state-of-the-art airports with good runways to accommodate your Airbus 320s and 330s and all the huge Boeing jets that are stuck around the world. It has been estimated, probably, Honorable Speaker, a new airport would cost us, or rebuilding of the JKI would cost us about 200 billion shillings. It would be very easy, Honorable Speaker, today to raise the 200 billion shillings or the 100 billion shillings that was raised from the IPO from Kenya Pipeline, and the 200 and something billion shillings that will be raised from Safaricom partial divestiture should it be approved by this House. Take 200 billion shillings, and we go and build an airport. Yet, people in the northern parts of Kenya are starving. Animals are dying there every day, including parts of our coastal region, areas like Magarini and other areas in Kwale. And even other parts in upcountry, even in parts of central Kenya, there are people who are starving because of the drought that was there. Thank God there are rains. So the competing priorities that we have as a country, we must decide, do we pay school capitation for our children, or do we go and build an airport? And we could easily get the 200 billion shillings from the IPO and invest it in building an airport. We have that railway to nowhere, that toll around Dukamoja after Suswa. It is not giving us a return on the investment that the Kenyan public put in the building of that railway. For it to be meaningful and give us a return on investment, it must be able to connect our port in Mombasa to the port in Kisumu and to the hinterland, landlocked countries in the Great Lakes region, Uganda, DRC, and the others. Therefore, with all these competing priorities, Honorable Speaker, do we finish building a dam in Galana Kulalu and provide food to the starving Kenyans, including hay to animals that are starving in parts of our country, or do we build the airport? It is possible to chew gum and scale the stairs at the same time, Honorable Speaker. That is what this fund is speaking to. This fund is inviting us to be able to chew gum and scale the stairs, to be able not to overburden the Kenyan public with additional taxes or additional borrowing, but also at the same time to invest in very capital-intensive infrastructure projects, that the building of a new airport, completion of that railway, SGR railway, completion of the dual carriage roads that we have mentioned, be it Mausami to Rironi, be it Marwa to Nanyuki, to Isiolo, to Meru, back to Makutano, be it the one in Gong, Karen, and back to Gong Road. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, what will this fund do? Because I've had many people ask that. Okay, so you are telling us you have a national infrastructure fund and you privatize companies, state-owned companies, put the money in the fund. Then you have told us you will not pay debt from that fund, you will not pay salaries, it will not be budgetary support fund. Instead of getting 200 billion shillings to go and invest in the building of a new JKI or a new airport here in Nairobi, any person that you invite to do a public-private partnership, even in the private sector, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I know you are a very successful business person, you know, that whatever investment you make, Honorable Speaker, people leverage on equity. And people will have equity, then they go out and borrow. I'll have my 1 billion shillings, I want to invest in a 5 billion shillings project. That constitutes 20% of the investment in that project. So long as it's commercially viable, I go to the market, I raise another 4 billion shillings, then the project pays for itself. That is all government intends to do with this fund. The 200 billion shillings you raise from Safaricom or from Kenya Pipeline, instead of taking that 200 billion shillings, paying salaries, buying relief food, paying for our school capitation, we continue doing that as we have been doing through our locally raised revenues and what we are borrowing domestically and externally. But since the construction of an airport today is a huge commercial opportunity, and I alluded to that, supposing we had those efficient airports, all those world airlines in the Gulf had the opportunity today to use Kenya or Nairobi as their operation hub. You can imagine one airline going to Europe probably needs 3 sets of crews. That crew would need to be accommodated in hotels in Nairobi for them to come and change shifts. Imagine the investment opportunity in hotels, in our hospitality industry. Our taxis, our Uber drivers, having this hub as a connecting hub now between those countries where there is war and the rest of the world, Honorable Speaker. Today, somebody who was going to the US through Emirates or Qatar cannot. But if Qatar could operate from Nairobi, is a business opportunity and a commercially viable opportunity, Honorable Speaker. That is what I'm saying. If we take, say, we need 200 billion shillings to invest in a new airport. If we invite Honorable Robert Mbui as a private investor to come and invest in the airport, all Mbui will need is 50 billion shillings. Then he will go out and raise from the capital markets and financial markets another 150 billion shillings. That is the opportunity we want to tap into, Honorable Speaker. That we can have our 200 billion shillings, instead of investing a lot of it in that airport, we will take our 50 billion shillings, invite a private investor who will bring in the efficiency of the private sector to bring their 20 or 30 billion shillings, buy equity into that project of a new airport. And that new project will leverage on the equity that you have and the capital that you have to raise probably 5-fold or 10-fold the money that you are holding and be able to efficiently run a new airport that will repay itself. Therefore, instead of investing 200 billion shillings into one project, that 200 billion shillings can go into 10 projects. And that is how the President, in his State of the Nation address last year, for those who care to remember, alluded to how you can invest 5 trillion shillings in the next few years by leveraging on what we raise from our public assets that we privatize, leverage on that, raise more capital, invest in those capital-heavy infrastructure projects that will further grow our economy and create job opportunities for millions of our young people, whom we are very happy to keep lying to as we lecture them out there, telling them, oh, you will get jobs. Oh, go to school. We are paying for you school fees. You finish your schooling and you get jobs. But there will be no jobs if you don't grow this economy. And you will not grow this economy by taxing Kenyans or over borrowing. You will not. It is true. And Robert Mbui was telling us 2 years ago during the finance bill that you cannot tax the people to death. That is what now we are inviting you. Don't tax Kenyans to death. Let us have innovative new financing ways, models that have worked elsewhere, that have worked in UAE, that have worked in Singapore, that have worked in Australia, that have worked in Germany and other countries around the world. Because we aspire to be a first world country, that aspiration must be backed by solid legislation like this. Solid legislation that will ensure that we protect our public assets. Solid legislation that will ensure that the assets we privatize, that money does not go to waste. And generations to come will see a new SGR, will see a new airport, will see dams in Galana Kulalu, will see dams in Tana River, in Kilifi, will see a
Give him an additional 2 minutes just to wrap it up.
Honorable Speaker was saying a nation that will be able to feed itself. That will not happen by accident, Honorable Speaker. It must be deliberate and conscious effort by leaders. And I say by leaders, Honorable Speaker, because politicians will tend to speak to what they think will be exciting to the gallery. I want to invite you, honorable ladies and gentlemen, honorable members of parliament, please desist from the temptation to be politicians. I know next year is an electoral year, but Kenyans will remember you for the legislation like this that you passed, that protected the assets, grew the economy, and secured the future of our children. And I say our children for those of us who have children, and those of us who have young children, for that matter. Because I know some of us have children who are as old as me. But those with young children...
Order, MD, majority leader.
Sorry?
If it were not for politics, you would not be addressing this house. But there's good politics and there's bad politics.
There's good, yes,
so
Honorable
make the
Speaker, thank
distinction.
you. There's good politics, but there's backward politics. Retrogressive politics. That only seeks to excite the masses without speaking truth to them. I hear people saying, oh, I want to speak truth to power. Also speak truth to the people. Because the power belongs to the people. Power comes from the people. If you do not speak truth to them, they will punish you and punish you next year. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and request the very intelligent chair of the Finance and National Planning Committee, a leader, not just a politician, a leader par excellence, a first-class honor student, second-term member of parliament serving the people of Molo, and doing exemplary well in Molo. And I say that because I have investments in Molo and I know what is happening in Molo, Honorable Speaker. A man who has dedicated his life to the transformation of this country. The member for Molo, my namesake, the Honorable Kuria Kimani, and the chair of Finance Committee will second this motion. And he's a great man. Wait and...
Thank you very much, my leader of majority. And you forgot to mention, there are only less